The sky over Arlington felt unnaturally heavy, an oppressive blanket of gray that muted the world beneath it. The air was thick with a stillness that didn't belong, like time itself was holding its breath. Rows of white gravestones stretched endlessly, witnesses to silent wars long past. At the center of it all stood a flag-draped casket, surrounded by men and women in uniform, their faces blank, their grief masked by discipline. But then came the sound, sharp, raw, a howl that split through the stillness like a blade. It was Ranger, a weathered German shepherd, standing atop the casket, his cries not of sorrow, but of defiance. Ranger's body shook, but not from fear. There was something frantic in the way he moved, clawing at the flag, his eyes darting between the crowd. 2 handlers tried to remove him, but he bared his teeth. Not at them, but at the space around the coffin, as if guarding it. He wasn't just mourning his partner. He was protecting him or something else entirely. Whispers began to ripple through the gathered soldiers and mourners. This wasn't normal. This wasn't grief. It was a warning. Sergeant Ben Holloway, now retired, watched from a short distance, his fists clenched at his sides. He had served with Captain Jacob Harland. He had seen firsthand the bond between man and dog on the battlefield, had once carried Ranger himself through enemy fire. Now, the sight of the dog losing control, at Jacob's funeral, sent something cold through his chest. Next to him, his wife Karen Holloway placed a hand gently on his arm. She saw it too. Ranger wasn't reacting to death. He was reacting to a lie. "Let him be," came a calm, authoritative voice. Colonel Franklin Mercer, though retired, still commanded attention. His expression was grim, his voice low. "He's trying to tell us something." The handlers hesitated, then stepped back. A solemn nod from Franklin was all it took to signal the honor guard. Slowly, reverently, the casket seal was released. As the lid rose, the atmosphere shifted. The silence became suffocating. The air turned electric. And when the lid opened fully, the illusion shattered. It wasn't Jacob Harland lying in that coffin. A murmur of disbelief swelled into gasps. One young soldier, Kyle Jensen, fell to his knees, visibly shaking. Inside the casket was a man none of them recognized. A stranger, pale, still, dressed in uniform, but unmistakably not the man they had come to bury. Ranger stopped moving. His ears fell back. He let out a low, broken whimper, stepped down from the casket, and lay beside it. His body curled against the wood, as if still trying to shield something. Ben staggered back, mind racing, heart hammering in his chest. His eyes searched for meaning, for logic. But all he found was horror. And in the distance, beyond the walls of Arlington, a black SUV idled with its engine running. Inside sat Quinn Wallace, government credentials tucked neatly in his coat pocket, his gaze fixed coldly on the scene unfolding. He lifted a phone to his ear. "It started," he said. The dog reacted. They opened it. There was a pause, then a slow exhale. "Then we'll need to make sure that Sergeant Holloway doesn't start asking the wrong questions. If this chapter hooked you, drop a like, subscribe, and turn on the bell. We're on the road to 100K subs. With you here, the next twist will hit even harder." Ben Holloway didn't sleep that night. Neither did Karen. The image of the stranger in the coffin kept flashing in his mind. His pale face, the stillness, the complete and undeniable fact that it wasn't Jacob Harland. Arlington had been turned into a crime scene cloaked in formality. And while others whispered about a mix-up, Ben knew better. Ranger knew better. That howl, it wasn't grief. It was outrage. At 3:47 a.m., Ben stood in his kitchen, staring at a cold cup of coffee. His hands trembled slightly. He had buried friends before, brothers in arms. But this was different. This wasn't just death. This was a disappearance. Karen entered the room quietly, still in her robe, her face soft with worry. She didn't say anything right away. She just walked up behind him and wrapped her arms around his waist. "You need to go see Ranger," she whispered. "He knows something you don't." By sunrise, Ben was at the kennel facility on the edge of town where Ranger had been taken. The staff had been instructed to keep the dog under close observation. But when Ben arrived, the young officer at the front desk looked confused. "Sir," he said cautiously, "Ranger hasn't eaten, hasn't slept. He just stares at the door." Ben didn't answer. He just nodded and walked in. The moment Ranger saw him, his ears perked up. His body tensed. He didn't bark. He didn't whimper. He walked slowly to the gate and stared. Ben crouched down and looked the dog in the eyes. "What did you see, boy?" he murmured. Ranger stepped closer, pressing his nose to the bars. Then he did something Ben hadn't seen since the battlefield. He sat, lifted his right paw and tapped the ground once, twice, then a pause. It was a signal, a code. One Jacob had taught him. A message, not safe. Meanwhile, across town, inside a nondescript federal building, Quinn Wallace was reviewing the incident report. He read each line carefully, marking names with a pen: Ben Holloway, Karen Holloway, Franklin Mercer, Kyle Jensen. When he got to Ranger's file, he paused. The canine's combat record was exemplary. 3 confirmed life-saving detections, 1 injury in action, and a behavioral note. Highly responsive to deception. Quinn frowned. He turned to the agent across from him. "Have Jensen watched. If he breaks, I want to know before anyone else does. And keep Holloway on a soft leash for now." Back at the kennel, Ben was walking Ranger through the field behind the facility, away from cameras. As they moved, Ranger suddenly stopped and sniffed the air. His body stiffened. Ben looked around. That's when he noticed it. Tire tracks in the dirt. Fresh. Not government-issued. Civilian. "Someone's been here," he whispered. Ranger barked once, sharp and alert, then took off running toward a wooded area. Ben followed without thinking, his heart pounding in his chest. They ran until they came upon it, half buried beneath a blanket of fallen leaves. A torn military duffel bag. Ben dropped to his knees and unzipped it slowly. Inside, wrapped in stained fabric, were 3 items. A bloodied photo of Jacob Harland and Ranger, a military ID with a different name scratched over, and a notebook, soaked but still legible. And inside that notebook was a list of names. Ben's was on it, so Era Jacobs, and so was Kyle Jensen's. The list felt heavier than the rain falling around him. Ben Holloway crouched beneath the trees, the wet notebook trembling in his hands. The pages were wrinkled, stained, not just by weather, but by time, maybe even by blood. Each name scribbled on that list pulled at something buried deep in his chest. He had seen some of those names on mission reports, others on memorial walls. And then there was his own, clearly written, and Jacob Harland's. Each name underlined, crossed out, or marked with strange military symbols only men from a certain kind of war would recognize. Beside him, Ranger didn't bark. He just sat, silent and watchful, his ears shifting at every sound in the woods, as if still guarding a man who wasn't supposed to be alive. Ben's mind swirled with questions. Why was Jacob carrying this? Was he being hunted, or doing the hunting? When he saw the note at the bottom of the page, "Trust no one, not even me," it knocked the air from his lungs. That didn't sound like the Jacob he knew, unless the man he thought he knew had been a mask all along. Across town, in a dark apartment smelling of old cigarette smoke and sleepless nights, Kyle Jensen sat hunched over a small desk. He hadn't touched food in almost a day. The funeral had rattled something loose inside him, memories he tried to crush beneath obedience and silence. But now they were alive again, clawing their way up from his gut. The face in the coffin had confirmed what he feared most. They had never buried the truth. And whatever happened in the desert, it wasn't just a failed mission. It had been a setup. Trembling, Kyle picked up his phone. He didn't want to call Ben. He needed to. "Sergeant Holloway?" "Go ahead," Ben answered without hesitation. Kyle's voice cracked. "We weren't supposed to open the door that night, but Jacob was inside. Hurt. We thought he was dead." He paused, his throat closing. "Then men came, not ours. They took something, burned the rest." There was silence. "And now they're watching me." Back at the federal office, Quinn Wallace leaned against his desk, arms crossed, listening to the recorded call. The agents around him looked tense. "He's talking," one of them muttered. Quinn nodded slowly, as if this were all part of a plan unraveling exactly as he predicted. "Good," he said, almost with satisfaction. "Let them think they're ahead. The truth always drives men to act foolishly." His eyes flicked to a monitor showing Ben Holloway's location. "And when they get too close, we bury the truth again. Deeper this time." Later that night, Ben sat on the back porch, the damp notebook resting on his lap. Karen watched him from the doorway, wrapped in a blanket. "You're going to follow this, aren't you?" she asked quietly. He nodded without looking up. "Because if Jacob's alive, then he's running from something bigger than death." He looked toward the tree line, where darkness seemed to breathe. "And I need to know what could scare a man like him so much that he'd rather the world believe he was dead." The morning fog hung thick over Arlington, drowning the world in a cold silence. Ben Holloway drove with both hands tight on the wheel, the notebook resting on the passenger seat like a loaded weapon. He wasn't sure what he was about to find, but instinct guided him to Colonel Franklin Mercer's house. It was quiet, too quiet. The front gate was open. The American flag, usually flying above the porch, was missing, and the front door unlocked. As he stepped inside, every bone in his body tensed. The air was heavy, the kind of stillness that only comes after something violent. The study had been torn apart, papers scattered across the floor, drawers ripped open. A shattered photograph of Franklin in uniform lay underfoot. But in the middle of the chaos, one file had been left behind: Phoenix Echo. The name struck a nerve. Ben reached for it, but before he could open it, he heard the click of a boot in the hallway. He turned just in time to see the muzzle of a weapon rise. A shot rang out, slamming into the wooden frame beside him. Without thinking, Ben crashed through the nearest window, glass tearing into his arm as he rolled across the porch and bolted down the street. A dark SUV sped off in the opposite direction, its windows blacked out, leaving only questions in its wake. Back at home, blood drying on his sleeve, Ben dropped the file on the kitchen table. Karen rushed to him, horror on her face. "Ben, what happened?" He didn't answer right away. He was staring at a photo inside the folder, an old military image, a unit standing in front of a bombed-out compound. One man in the photo was unmistakably Jacob Harland, but the name beneath said Eric Hayes. Karen picked it up slowly. "You're telling me Jacob was living under an alias?" she asked, barely above a whisper. Ben shook his head, voice low and sharp. "Not just living, working. This wasn't just covert. This was buried." Meanwhile, across town, Carl Jensen sat in his car outside a federal building, staring at the front entrance with dead eyes. When he saw Quinn Wallace step outside, calm and unreadable, Kyle's breath caught. That man had been in the room after the mission, the one who said nothing and looked too long. Quinn wasn't just an agent. He was part of whatever machine had swallowed Jacob Harland whole. Kyle gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. For the first time, he realized he wasn't just afraid of being watched. He was already marked. That night, as Ben sat on the porch replaying every moment, Ranger perked up from his spot by the door. The dog let out a low growl, not loud, but sharp. Ben looked up just in time to see a figure across the street, standing motionless behind a lamppost, almost hidden by the fog. No movement, just watching. Karen appeared beside him, following his gaze. "They know," she whispered. "They're not trying to hide it anymore." Ben didn't look away. "Good," he said, his voice like gravel. "Because I'm done hiding too." Ben Holloway couldn't shake the image of the figure on the sidewalk. Still, silent, watching. It hadn't been a warning. It was a threat disguised as routine. The next morning, he loaded Ranger into his truck and drove out to the only place he believed might still hold the truth. The ranch of Sam Whitaker, an old friend of Jacob's, a man who knew every scar carved into his soul. The ranch sat far from the reach of cell towers or curious neighbors, hidden between hills and dust-covered roads where secrets lasted longer than people. Sam didn't flinch when he saw Ben pull up with Ranger. He just looked him in the eyes and said, "I figured you'd come." They didn't speak much at first. Silence between veterans often said more than words could. Inside the barn, surrounded by rusted tools and hay bales, Sam dragged out a weathered wooden trunk. "Jacob sent this to me almost 2 years ago," he said quietly. "Told me never to open it, unless someone came asking for him." The trunk was locked, but the key was hidden beneath a stone marked with a strange symbol. A circle with a line through it, the same one from the notebook. Inside was a carefully assembled collection of evidence: recordings, photographs, government documents with blacked-out lines, and one handwritten letter. The envelope had Ben's name on it. The handwriting was shaky, rushed, written by someone who feared he wouldn't get another chance. In the letter, Jacob revealed what he had discovered: a covert program inside the military. Soldiers were being used as pawns in fake missions, sent to die under false pretenses. The project was called Phoenix Echo. When Jacob refused to comply, he had become a target. "I had to disappear," the letter read. "But if you're reading this, they found you too." Back in the barn, Ben read the letter in silence. For a moment, he felt like Jacob was standing right beside him. Everything made sense now. His friend hadn't run. He'd sacrificed his entire life to leave a trail. But now, that trail had led directly to Ben. And whoever had hunted Jacob was now closing in. "This isn't just about Jacob anymore," Ben said, his voice steady. "It's about everyone on that list. They wanted us erased." Far down the dirt road, 2 black, unmarked cars rolled to a stop just out of sight. Inside one, Quinn Wallace held a phone to his ear. His tone was flat. "He found the trunk. The windows closed." On the other end, a voice replied coldly, "Then end it. Now." For the first time, Quinn hesitated. "If you were Ben, would you trust Sam and keep digging? Or run to save your life? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And do you think Quinn will follow the order? Or hesitate again?" The sun was beginning to set over the hills when Ben Holloway heard the first sound: gravel crunching under slow, deliberate tires. From inside the barn, he signaled Sam to stay low and grabbed the shotgun hanging by the door. Ranger was already alert, growling deep in his chest. The air outside had changed. It wasn't just quiet, it was charged. When Ben peeked through a crack in the wood, he saw them. 2 men in black tactical gear, moving toward the house with precision. This wasn't a conversation. It was a hit. Ben moved fast. "Back door. Now," he whispered to Sam. They slipped through the rear and ran toward the ravine behind the property. Ranger stayed close, ears back, eyes focused. One of the men shouted, and gunfire ripped through the silence. Bullets chewed into the barn walls. Ben ducked behind a boulder, breathing hard, the file folder clutched against his chest. "They're not here to scare us," Sam said grimly. "They're here to clean house." Ben didn't answer. He already knew. In the chaos, Ranger broke formation, darting toward one of the shooters with lethal speed. A blur of fur and fury. The agent didn't even have time to react. Ranger's body hit him like a missile, sending them both crashing into the dirt. Ben heard the struggle, the snap of teeth, the cry of pain, and then silence. One down, but the other wasn't far behind. Ben grabbed Sam and ran. They had seconds, maybe less. When they reached the edge of the ridge, Ben turned to face Sam. "Take the truck," he said. "Go to Karen. Tell her everything. Tell her I'll come when I can." Sam started to protest, but Ben cut him off with a firm stare. "They'll follow the trail to me. That's what I want." Sam nodded slowly, then took off. Ben watched the taillights disappear, then turned to face the dust rising behind him. The second agent was coming fast, and Ben was done running. As the enemy closed in, Ben stood in the open, shotgun raised, eyes unwavering. Ranger limped to his side, blood on his fur, but still standing. The man in black paused just 20 feet away, weapon ready, but then, for the briefest second, he hesitated. Maybe it was recognition, maybe it was fear, and in that breathless pause, Ben pulled the trigger. The blast echoed through the canyon like a warning to the world. When the smoke cleared, Ben stood still, the second agent lying motionless in the dirt. Blood pooled beneath the man's chest, his weapon slipping from his fingers. Ben didn't flinch. His arms were burning, his leg grazed by a bullet, but his grip on the shotgun never loosened. Beside him, Ranger sat trembling, his side bleeding, his breath ragged. "You held the line," Ben whispered to the dog. "Just like always." He didn't have much time. More would come. They always came in pairs, but never alone. Ben limped back toward the barn, dragging the fallen agent's radio from his belt. Static hissed through the speaker, until a voice crackled through. "Status check. Unit 2, report." Ben pressed the button but said nothing. He let the silence speak for him. He knew they would triangulate the signal soon. That meant he had one shot to disappear, and only one person left who might have answers. Dr. Evelyn Marks, the former military veterinarian who once worked with Ranger and had ties to the early days of Phoenix Echo. Driving with one hand on the wheel and the other pressing gauze against Ranger's wound, Ben kept the truck on back roads. The sky was turning purple, the kind of dusk that never felt safe. He kept checking the mirrors. Every pair of headlights behind him could mean death. "Hold on, boy," he muttered. "We're almost there." Karen's voice played in his mind like a ghost. Maybe Jacob did this to protect us. But if that were true, then why did it feel like no one was being protected at all? Hours later, he reached a remote house hidden near the edge of the Shenandoah forest. It was dark, no porch light, but the truck's headlights revealed motion inside. Before he could knock, the door opened. There stood Dr. Marks, gray hair tied back, eyes sharp behind old glasses. She said nothing at first, just looked at Ben, and then at Ranger. Her face softened, but only slightly. "I told Jacob you'd come," she said. "Not if. When." Ben stepped inside, chest heaving. "They're trying to erase us," he said. Dr. Marks nodded and turned to close the door behind him. "I know," she said quietly, "because I helped them build the lie." The inside of Dr. Evelyn Marks's cabin smelled like old paper and antiseptic. Ranger lay on a padded blanket near the fireplace, his side freshly bandaged, eyes flickering with exhaustion but trust. Ben sat across from her at the kitchen table, where a thick manila envelope sat between them like a loaded gun. Dr. Marks removed her glasses slowly, her face unreadable. "Phoenix Echo wasn't about extraction," she said. "It wasn't even about the enemy. It was about testing human thresholds, morality, obedience, memory." Her voice was steady. "And Jacob found out too much." Ben's knuckles whitened around the coffee mug. "Why him?" "Because he had a brain no one expected," she replied. He started connecting dots. Soldiers who vanished, mission reports that contradicted themselves, labs in places they shouldn't exist. They made him an operative under a false name to keep him close. Eric Hayes was their way of using him while isolating him from the world. She paused. But Jacob turned the mask against them. He faked his death to save what was left of himself. She slid the envelope across the table. Inside were documents, test results, maps marked with red ink, and a final report signed by Quinn Wallace. "He wasn't always a cleaner," she muttered. "At first, he was just another patriot. Then he started believing the lie more than the truth." Ben scanned the report. Experiments. Soldiers used as psychological subjects under simulated combat trauma. Names he recognized from the list. All crossed out. All erased. "Jesus," Ben breathed. "They weren't soldiers. They were test data." Ranger whimpered softly, and Ben reached over to rest a hand on his head. He could feel the heat of the dog's body, the pain he carried, the loyalty that never broke. Dr. Marks stood and walked to a locked cabinet, pulling out a small metal box. Inside was a flash drive. "This has everything. The backups, the recordings, the real mission logs." She looked at Ben. "But it's not enough to expose them. You need to survive long enough to show it." Outside, in the distance, faint headlights appeared through the trees. Not fast, not loud, but coming. Ben looked at Ranger, then at the drive. "We're not running anymore," he said. Dr. Marks nodded grimly. Then you better be ready to finish what Jacob started. The sound of tires crunching gravel was getting louder. Ben stood by the window, flash drive clenched in his fist, eyes locked on the two dark SUVs moving slowly up the path to Dr. Marks's cabin. "We don't have much time," she said, already loading paper files into a burn barrel by the door. "Once they get here, this place is done." Ranger stood, limping but alert, sensing the shift in energy like a soldier before the first shot. Ben looked at him and gave a nod. "One more mission, buddy." Inside the cabin, the atmosphere was tight with purpose. Dr. Marks handed Ben a black satchel with the drive, a burner phone, and a compact pistol. "There's a broadcasting tower 6 miles out. If you get there, you can upload the entire file to a secure channel. It's enough to take them down, but only if it gets out." Ben stared at the bag for a second too long. "And if I don't make it?" Evelyn's eyes didn't flinch. "Then they win again, just like they did with the others." Ben turned to Ranger. "You up for this?" The dog didn't bark. He didn't have to. He just moved to Ben's side and waited. They slipped out the back while the engines idled out front. Moments later, the cabin erupted in chaos as the agents breached the front door. Gunfire cracked like thunder. Dr. Marks didn't scream. She didn't run. She just stood her ground long enough for them to believe Ben was still inside. A decoy, a delay, a sacrifice. In the trees, Ben ran harder than his legs wanted. Every breath was fire in his lungs. Every sound behind him another ghost chasing him down. Ranger kept pace, even as blood dotted the leaves beneath his paws. The tower loomed in the distance, a jagged silhouette against the dying light. "Almost there," Ben muttered. "We just have to hold on a little longer." He didn't know if the file would be enough. He didn't even know if anyone would believe it. But the truth deserved its moment in the light. Back at the cabin, Quinn Wallace stepped over the smoking remnants of Dr. Marks's last stand. His face was unreadable. Another agent approached. No sign of Holloway. Quinn didn't answer. He just looked at a photo on the wall. Jacob Harland in uniform, smiling beside Ranger. "They're headed to the tower," he said finally. "Send the team. Shoot to kill." The agent hesitated. "It'll look bad if it goes public." Quinn cut him off with a stare. "It won't." The sun was nearly gone when Ben reached the base of the tower. He shoved the drive into the transmitter port, praying the signal held. A progress bar began to climb on the screen, 10%, 15%, and then he heard it. Boots, voices, too close, too fast. He turned to Ranger, who stood facing the noise, teeth bared, tail still. "No matter what happens," Ben said, loading his pistol, "this truth gets out." Ranger didn't blink, and as the shadows approached, Ben took position between the transmitter and the approaching storm, ready to make his stand. The first shots echoed through the trees like the end of time. Ben dove behind the metal console at the base of the tower, bullets ripping through the air around him. The upload bar flashed 58%. Ranger growled beside him, ready to defend with his last breath. Ben fired back, each shot calculated, desperate to buy just seconds more. He didn't know how many were coming. He just knew he had to hold them off long enough for the truth to live. Ranger lunged into the shadows as two agents broke the tree-line. The chaos was instant: gunfire, barking, shouts. Ben's heart pounded as he reloaded with shaking hands. He could hear Ranger struggling, snarling through pain. "Come on! Come on!" He whispered to the screen. 72%, 84%, 91%. A flashbang exploded near the tower, throwing Ben to the ground. His ears rang, his vision blurred. But even through the noise, he could hear one sound: Ranger's final cry. Ben crawled to the transmitter, blood running from a cut above his eye. 97%, 98%, 99%, 100%. Upload complete. A message blinked across the screen. Transmission sent. Secure channel confirmed. He slumped back, breath ragged, the weight of the moment crashing over him. The truth was out. Phoenix Echo was no longer a ghost. Somewhere, in some newsroom or database, it was now real, irrefutable, But silence followed. The agents didn't rush in. There was no gun pressed to his head. Instead, Quinn Wallace appeared alone, stepping out of the trees, his weapon lowered. "You think anyone will believe it?" he asked. Ben looked at him with hollow eyes. "They don't have to believe me. They just have to see the names." Quinn paused, something flickering in his expression. Fatigue, maybe even shame. But it was too late for redemption. "They'll come for you," Quinn said. "They always do." Ben looked down at Ranger's still body, then back up. "Let them." Days later, the headlines spread like wildfire. Whistleblower files from a secret military program. Dozens of confirmed deaths. Disappeared soldiers. Congressional hearings were launched. Investigations reopened. Karen watched it all from home, clutching Ranger's old collar in her hands, tears silently falling. In the background, a phone rang. When she answered, the voice on the other end said only, "He made it," then hung up. Ben Holloway disappeared after that. No photos, no interviews, just a single envelope mailed to a veterans center. Inside was a photograph of Jacob Harland and Ranger, standing in a desert sunrise, smiles real and unguarded. On the back, in Ben's handwriting, were 5 words. "We were never just soldiers." Enjoyed the story? Leave a like, subscribe, and turn on the bell for more real, emotional stories that inspire, move, and deserve to be remembered.